Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're back with another episode of Stock Market Recap, and we're going to be talking about how stocks did, not just for today, but also for the week. And we're going to be talking about some potential catalysts for next week and any major events that we have. We're also going to be going over a couple earnings reports that I didn't get to cover yesterday. And yeah, that's about it. Hope you enjoy. Alright, so here I've pulled up the stock screener for the day, and as you can see, there's not much movement going on. There are a couple outstanders. We have Tesla was up 5% today, Palantir was up 4%, and Micron was down 8%. We'll talk about all of that in just a second, but real quick, I do just want to start off with a bit of a story. So yesterday I was going to record the episode for the stock market recap, and actually the recording got corrupted. And you might think, why does that matter? Well, you see, I use an old computer with an Intel chip. And when I tried to save the recording, it told me that my system's overloaded and you basically need to upgrade your system. And that basically means that the Intel chip failed me, couldn't record simple episode of Stock Market Recap. So that's why I think you have to buy Nvidia over Intel. Although today Nvidia's down and Intel's up, so maybe I'm wrong. But yeah, I just wanted to say that. But let's actually talk about some of this movement that we got. So let's start with the S&P. The S&P started out in the red, and then it kind of slowly climbed its way and closed in the green by about 0.08%. The Nasdaq was up by 0.4%, so that's quite a nice bounce, and the Dow was up slightly. So let's start with Tesla. So Tesla, they're up 5%, which is nice, I guess, considering all the pain we've seen in that stock. So there is one reason for this. Basically, last night Elon held an emergency shareholder meeting, and basically the main takeaway is he literally said to hold on to your stock. And I guess investors found that bullish since now they're buying up the stock. Obviously, Tesla stock is down around 40% year to date, so it's really not doing well. And I think it's nice to see Musk finally address his shareholders because we really haven't gotten any clarity from him or anyone at Tesla, really. So it's nice to see that he acknowledges that share price is down this much and he's addressing it to shareholders. That's always nice to see. But can Tesla stock continue climbing? We're gonna have to see about that. It's got a long way to go until it reaches all time highs again. Because remember, I hit like 480 or something like that at its peak, so it's still down 50% from there. And yeah, it's got a long way to go, but with earnings coming up in around a month, I guess we'll see where that takes it. Now let's move on to Palantir. So Palantir is a very interesting stock, actually. It pumped all the way to 125 earlier in the year, and then it got destroyed when the Trump tariff crash happened, which was around a month ago. And it basically went from 125 to around $80. And it's actually been holding up so well that I'm actually really impressed. And now it's all the way up to 90. It actually hit 90 for the first time in, I believe, a month. And yeah, it's just crazy that this stock continues to trade at the high multiples that it's at. If you don't know, Palantir PE is like 500, and I know PE isn't like a great metric to use when it comes to companies like Palantir, but on traditional metrics, it's definitely completely overvalued here. So the fact that it's holding up in like a semi-bear market is actually super interesting to me. We'll see if it can keep it up. All right, before we get to the earnings, one more thing I just want to mention is you can see Boeing's up 3% and Lockheed's down 6% almost. And there's a reason for this. Boeing actually got a contract with Trump about, I believe it was about some fighter jet thing. I'm not too um versed in the details about it, but that's why Boeing was up, and obviously Lockheed didn't get it, so they got sold off a little bit. But yeah, that's just minor piece of news that we got today. So anyway, let's jump right into the earnings. So we're gonna start off with Nike. So Nike beat EPS and revenue. They beat EPS by about actually like around 90% beat on EPS, which is absolutely wild. And they beat revenue by about 200 billion, so it's not too bad either. And of course, the stock is down 5%. So why is it down? Well, there are a couple of reasons. So first of all, on the call, um, the Nike management team didn't really give us anything interesting. Like, obviously, Nike stock has been struggling over the years. As you can see, it's kind of been on a downtrend ever since peak of 2021. It's down 60% from its absolute top. And it's actually at a 5-year low. It hit a 5-year low today. So I feel like the management team really needs to say something like crazy to turn uh, any kind of attention to Nike right now. And they need like a turnaround plan for the company because they've really just been struggling lately. But they didn't say anything of that matter, and therefore the stock did get sold off. Um, Now it was down much more in the morning, as you can see. It was 65. It actually recovered around 3 to 4% of its losses, and yeah, but it still ended down 5%, so that's obviously not too great. But yeah, Nike is a really like it's a really interesting stock. I don't think their company is doing too great. I think until we get like a either a new CEO or something like that, something that could really change how they operate. I don't think we're getting anything interesting so far, and that's why the stock kind of continues to struggle. Moving on, we have Micron, one of my actually I used to have some shares of this company. I'm a pretty big fan of this company. I mean, I'm a fan of most semiconductor companies, but I think Micron is great. I think their stock is kind of undervalued, but anyway, let's talk about their numbers. So, EPS they beat and revenue they beat by about 150 billion or 150 million rather, which is pretty nice. Um, they did they didn't raise guidance on the call, which is probably why we're about to see what I'm about to show you. And as you can see, the stock was down 8%, which is just, I mean, it's just incredible. Like, just because they didn't raise guidance, you're gonna take it down 8%. I mean, whatever. Well, I think their earnings were fine. I don't think that they deserve to go up 10%, but they definitely didn't deserve to go down 8%. And it was worse at one point in the day. So yeah, I think they're starting to get pretty cheap here. You can see they were really popping off back in June of 2024, back when the semiconductors were in a bull market. And then as well, um, and then as the other semiconductors started struggling, Micron wasn't doing too well either, and it's still down around 40% from this high that it hit in June. And I think they're a great company. I think, I think they're definitely going to get back up there at some points. It's just a matter of whether the market enters like a bull cycle or we continue being bearish. I think if we were back in June of 2024, these numbers would send the stock up 8%. But, I guess it's just a different market now, if you think about it. Because in 2024, pretty much every dip was bought, and any earnings, um, like any earnings beat would send the stock up. But now investors are a lot more cautious and they want perfection. And we've seen this with Nvidia many times where they absolutely crush it and then they go down because they miss on one number, you know? So, yeah, it's definitely a tough environment for semiconductors right now. I mean, none of them are really doing that well, and Micron's joining the party now. However, it is still up 8% for the year, which is a lot better than other semiconductor companies. But but yeah, semiconductors are just really taking it on the chin this year, so far at least. Maybe they're gonna have a crazy turnaround. I think they definitely can, because with how bullish I am on Nvidia, I think Micron will definitely succeed, especially in the long term. Now up next we have FedEx. They missed slightly on EPS and they beat on revenue also slightly. And their stock was down 6%. Well, in the morning it was down 11%, so I guess it kind of recovered some of those losses, but yeah, I mean, you just can't miss in this market. You just can't miss. And they also, I'm pretty sure, yeah, they lowered their guidance, um, issuing some potential issues with tariffs. So that's obviously a negative. And yeah, FedEx has just not been a great stock for the past really couple months. It's down 16% year to date, and it peaked here like right after the Trump euphoria back in November, and it's down 25% from that absolute top. So yeah, we have FedEx at a 52-week low. And similarly, UPS was down slightly today because it's kind of correlated with FedEx. Um, and they're also not doing great overall. They obviously had this pretty weak earnings report earlier this year. They were down 14% one day. And they're actually only down 7% year to date, so not as bad as FedEx, but obviously it seems like these guys aren't doing too great this year. And one more bonus earnings that I did want to mention. Today we had Carnival Cruise report their earnings, and they beat on revenue, and they actually had a major beat on EPS, and they raised guidance, but the stock is still down. This one I really don't get. They didn't mention any concerns with tariffs or any of the Trump policies on the calls. They didn't mention anything about the consumer weakening or anything of that matter, and yet they're still being taken down by the market. So this one makes no sense to me. It was down actually a lot more in the morning. It actually went green for a little bit. But at the end of the day, down by about 1%. And I really do think that this is not the right reaction. I don't know what exactly Wall Street is confused about or what they're concerned about here. So hopefully we'll see a steady recovery on Carnival Cruise. All right, let's get into important stuff for next week. So we don't have anything from the Fed. We don't have anything planned from the Trump administration, but we do have a couple important earnings reports. Well, not really important, but I think that'll be interesting. So let's start with Monday. So up first we have Intuitive Machines, aka Lunar. So their stock actually has been on a major decline in the past couple of days. Yeah, they're down 60% year to date. Um, so this is not really a meme stock. I mean, it's a speculative stock, but it's not like a complete meme stock, like one of the ones we're about to talk about. But yeah, it had this huge pump kind of at the end of last year, where it went from the threes and or fours all the way up to 24 or something like that at the highs. And then recently it's collapsed because one of its shuttles that it's sent to the moon literally collapsed. And I guess the stock decided to do the same thing. And what I mean by that, by the way, is it landed sideways, so it didn't even make it there successfully. And obviously, given the speculative nature of the stock, it just sells off on something like that because, yeah, that's just the nature of these kind of meme stocks. Although I admit it's not really a meme stock, it definitely has like a real investor base. Same thing with Rocket Lab, they're a very similar company. I'll probably talk about them someday. I'm not like really into these stocks, but I can see the moats, and a lot of people definitely believe in that space will be the future. Um, but yeah, let's move on. So next up, after close, really the only interesting one I see is Oklo, and this is another kind of speculative slash meme stock. Although it is $3 billion market cap, which is not something to laugh about. This is another stock that pumped from like a couple bucks. I think it was like 6 or 5 or something like that, all the way up to 50. So that's like a 10x in less than a year, which is actually really nice. And initially it was up 150% year to date. So yeah, that was something. And then it ended up selling off, and now it's only up 25%, but that's still outperforming pretty much the whole S&P 500. So they're definitely still up a lot, considering they were in $5 around the time stocks were crashing in August. But yeah, I guess we'll see what numbers they put out. By the way, I forgot to mention they're like a nuclear company, nuclear energy, but they're obviously a lot smaller than some of the big ones like Vistra or Constellation Energy. But the idea is like if Nvidia continues building these data centers, you need energy for that, and you can use Constellation Energy, you can use Vistra, or you could use Oklo. So maybe someday this will become a real thing. So the next one we're going to talk about is actually GameStop, and well, this one's kind of funny. So you know, GameStop, like everyone always overhypes their earnings, and then nothing happens, and the stock price just goes down. Um, Everyone expects like a 50% move or something crazy, but really nothing interesting happens in their reports. But another funny thing is like around maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, they announced that Ryan Cohen, the CEO, was potentially going to deploy some cash and buy some Bitcoin. And initially, the stock was up like 20% on that day, but then it kind of got sold off and nobody really cared about it. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess we'll see what they say on the call or what the numbers show, but yeah, this is like another meme stock. So now we're getting into our first real company. We have Dollar Tree. So their stock is actually it's down 12% year to date, and Dollar Tree is one of those that's really been hit because of the Trump tariffs and the fears of a recession and everything like that. It fell 18% during the Trump crash, mini crash. It's recovered some of that, but yeah, obviously it's struggling. Dollar General, I'm pretty sure, is doing not the best either. Okay, wow, never mind. I guess they're doing completely fine. They're actually up year to date, but they weren't doing fine. As you can see, they're down 45% for the year. They had this one really bad earnings report somewhere in August. They fell 30% in one day, and it's just been struggling ever since. Now, the final company that I'm going to be talking about is Lululemon. So they're actually a pretty big company, 40 billion. And their stock has been quite the ride lately. In 2024, it was on a decline for most of the year, and then somewhere in September slash October, it started turning around, and then it really started rallying into the end of the year. It almost made up all of the losses that it lost throughout the year, and it was down like 50% at one point. So we're talking big losses here. And this year, it's not off to a great start. It's down 13%. And Lululemon is pretty volatile on earnings, so we'll definitely be looking out for that one. We'll see what their numbers show. If they have great numbers, they're probably going to go up like 10%. But obviously, if they have any fears of anything to do with the Trump trade or Trump tariffs, then they're probably going to get sold off pretty bad. and they're actually still pretty expensive compared to where they were before. They were like in the 200s or 250s, so it's got room to go down. But I guess we'll see what happens. And now, with all that out of the way, let's take some time to just kind of reflect on what's been going on and where we could be going from here. So, obviously, this year is not off to a great start. S&P is down for the year, and most stocks are down. There are a couple outliers, but especially Mag 7 are not doing well, and there are reasons. Obviously, we were doing great until there were two things that happened that kind of took stocks down. The first was DeepSeek, which happened on January 27th. It was basically a 17% crash on Nvidia and around a 20% crash on most tech stocks. So that obviously was a major setback. And the second thing was the Trump tariff mini crash, which started on February 19th, I think, and it's been going on basically until today. It's still kind of going on. We haven't really found a bottom. We're kind of just going up, down, up, down. There's no clear bottom right now. But those two events have caused the downfall of most of these stocks, and they obviously could recover, and this is what we're going to talk about right now. What's like a realistic path to a full recovery on, especially these Max 7 names? It's kind of hurts seeing all of them down this much, while most other stocks are up, and they're actually bringing down the S&P quite a lot. If not for the Max 7, I think the S&P would actually be up for the year. That's a pretty interesting fact, but yeah, so let's lay out like a realistic plan of how we're going to get back to all-time highs. So first, we need Nvidia to crush their next earnings. And I know the next earnings are not really that soon, but in about 2 months, Nvidia is going to report earnings. They need to crush the numbers. Well, I have a lot of faith in them because they always crush them. But we also need the market to react positively because we need to bring back momentum to these stocks. That's the thing. When a stock is going down, nobody wants to buy it. But if a stock is going up, then suddenly a lot of people want to buy it, including people who don't even know what Nvidia does. They're just traders. They just buy it on the upwards momentum. And you could argue that that's just going to boost the stock price for the short term, but really it could bring some new long-term investors into the game and get the stock price back up to where it belongs. And the second thing we need is on April 2nd, which is the day that Trump officially puts in all the tariffs, we need to get some signal that the world's not ending, there's going to be no recession, stuff like that. And if we get that signal, then we could confidently start going back up on some of these names that have been beaten down lately, because everyone's so worried about these tariffs that they don't really feel comfortable buying stocks. And that's a completely normal worry that a lot of investors have right now. And until that fear is gone, we can't really go up significantly, because obviously we're going to continue going down if things are looking bad. And right now things are not looking the best, to say the least. And it could just be a bunch of fear, all for nothing. But again, we have to wait till April 2nd. And these 8 or so trading sessions that we have until then will also be interesting. I don't think we're really going to have any major moves. I think we're just going to kind of stay flat. And then once April 2nd hits, we're probably going to have pretty volatile environment after that. We're either going to start rallying if tariffs turn out to be not that impactful, or if the other countries don't fight back against us. But if the opposite happens, then obviously we could see some more pain to the downside. And you just kind of have to be prepared for all of that. and it kind of sucks, but that's what we have to deal with. Under the Trump presidency, he creates very volatile markets, and you know, volatility could be hard to deal with, but at the end, there's also volatility to the upside. So that's what a lot of investors are hoping for right now. Hopefully, we get that at some point pretty soon. And yeah, I mean, it's all up to April 2nd, and about a month after that, we're going to have NVIDIA earnings, and that's going to determine a lot for not only the Max 7, but also the semiconductors. And that could definitely give the S&P a boost if that goes well. So, yeah, that sums up everything pretty much. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Stock Market Recap, and we'll be back next week. I will have another video coming out tomorrow. It's going to be all about NVIDIA. So stay tuned for that. And yeah, I hope you have a good rest of your night, and I'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.